Hi, I'm Mike Dilk and you're listening to the Relax Back UK show, the show that explores all kinds of health topics relevant to you, your family and your friends. Each week I talk to expert guests from a range of backgrounds to inform and entertain you. So please do join the Relax Back UK family and stay tuned.
Hi, and thank you for joining me on the Relax Back UK show. This week, prevention is better than cure.
3/4 of people only visit the doctor when it is absolutely necessary. So this kind of turns on its head the whole idea that the government's been talking about for the past few years, which is we need to be spending more on prevention rather than waiting until people get to the point where they either need to go to A&E or they're desperate for a GP appointment.
I chat with Dr. Carrie Ruxton about why we aren't really always very good at prevention. Then nutritionists Alex Clarke and Raymond Brown. I talked to them on about the world of convenience food versus home cooking and why this can be very important in our lives.
Sometimes takeaways can feel quite greasy or too salty, and then you get that sluggish feeling afterwards. Whereas actually, if you're cooking something from scratch, you can use much fresher ingredients that make you feel much better in yourself.
So please do stay tuned for a great show. Thank you. Dr. Carrie Ruxton is a dietitian, and my first question to her is, what is the difference between a dietitian and a nutritionist?
Absolutely. So the two degrees have very similar content, except for one thing, which is that dietitians work in hospitals while we're training. So we do a 4-year degree, and a year of that is spent working in a hospital on the wards and also in the community. And so we learn how to use food in a clinical sense, a bit like the way that doctors and nurses use medicines. We use food as medicine, and we are registered with a professional organisation, which nutritionists don't have to be at the moment.
Okay, all right. Now, I also noticed that you're Dr. Carrie Ruxton. So explain how you can call yourself a doctor.
Well, how I can call myself a doctor is because I have a PhD in nutrition. So my study was on the diets of 7 to 8-year-old children in Scotland. And I studied a whole group of them, nearly 140 of them, for 3 years to look at what they were eating and their body weight and tracking them over a year. Funnily enough, people call medical people doctor, but that is just an honorary title. So the people that have PhDs are actually the real doctors.
You're a real doctor, yeah. Yeah, no, I'm familiar with that. My wife is an academic, so I know that kind of the difference between doctors and MDs and all that.
Yeah.
So anyway, look, the theory is that we're kind of caught in a bit of a reactive health cycle, and we wait until problems arise before we do anything about our health. But I've got to say, I'm not so sure about that, because, you know, looking out of my office windows, I often see joggers running by, and like 200,000 people do park run every Saturday. We're approaching marathon season. You know, there's loads of marathons. The London Marathon alone, there are 50,000 runners, and gyms are quite well attended. So we're quite a healthy bunch, really, aren't we?
I'm afraid not, Mike. This data is based on an Ipsos survey of nearly 2,800 UK adults, which was commissioned by Holland and Barrett, who wrote a really interesting report, which is also available online. And what they found was that whilst about 8 in 10 Brits wanted more control of their health, in fact, less than half of them were doing anything about it on a regular basis. They were just waiting until something went wrong. So you were talking about all the people jogging out of your window. Just some stats. 4 in 10 engage in physical activity regularly. So you're looking at that 4 in 10 that are outside your window jogging, but you're not seeing the 6 in 10 that are slumped in front of Netflix or messing about on their computers or watching television and not doing any activity. We want more people to do activity. And what this report found is that people are just in this state of reactive repair where they're saying, yeah, you know, I kind of am not happy with could be my weight. I'm not happy with my joint health. I've got aches and pains. I feel a bit sluggish. I'm lacking in energy. I'm not sleeping very well. But hell, I'm not going to do anything about it until it becomes, a real issue. And in fact, what this report found as well is that 3/4 of people only visit the doctor when it is absolutely necessary. So this kind of turns on its head the whole idea that the government's been talking about for the past few years, which is we need to be spending more on prevention rather than waiting until people get to the point where they either need to go to A&E or they're desperate for a GP appointment.
I suppose by talking about the people that I see out doing exercise, I've made the absolute sort of classic scientific error of only using the data I can see that's right in front of me.
That's right. That's right. It's all the unseen health needs. Just some other stats. I think sleep is one of the big ones, and it's something that I don't think we talk about enough. Maybe it's because it doesn't really fall into any health professional category. I wouldn't expect to see people who have a sleeping problem. Maybe GPs don't, because what medication can they give them apart from sleeping pills? And yet, half of people have difficulty sleeping. And it's mostly women, actually. I don't know whether it's because of worries. Certainly women in the survey were experiencing anxiety and stress more often than men. Maybe they've got more caring responsibilities with elderly parents, with kids, teenagers. I don't know what it is. They're maybe just trying to juggle a bit more. But I think sleep is actually one of the big things that is then driving lack of energy, lack of motivation to do anything about your diet or your weight or your health. If we could get sleep sorted, I think a lot of other things would fall into place.
Okay, that's kind of certainly more easily said than done. Just in my household, my wife has suffered from finding it difficult to go to sleep, but that was kind of bound up with the menopause, actually, which is, I think a lot of people have trouble with sleep around that time.
Yes, certainly. I've experienced that too. And HRT definitely did help. But I'm certainly noticing that I wake up now in the night at the slightest thing. And then you get the thoughts in your head about the lists of things that you need to do tomorrow. Yeah. Maybe, teenage kids or, young adults in your family starting to worry you about what they're doing with their lives. And before you know it, you're lying there at 3 o'clock in the morning, just fretting over stuff that you can't do anything about at that time of night.
So, yeah, sleep is a big problem for sure. Exercise, we just touched on a problem. What about what we eat? How are we doing there?
Not that good. Funnily enough, this survey, this Holland and Barrett survey, was fairly kind of positive about people's diets. People were saying, "Oh yeah, I do eat 5 a day. Fruit and veg, and I'm trying to eat oily fish more often." There's about half of people that felt, they were generally doing the right thing. But you look at the government's own survey, the National Diet and Nutrition Survey, and it tells a slightly different picture. So what we find is that it's just over 1 in 10, it's about 15% of people are eating their 5 a day fruit and veg. So that means more than 80% of people are not getting that essential 5 fruit and veg a day. We also see that oily fish, which is one of the main sources of these amazing omega-3 fatty acids that are important for brain health and heart health and reducing inflammation, more than 90% of teenagers rarely eat any oily fish. And in adults, it's 2/3 that rarely eat oily fish.
Right.
And so vitamin D, they're just not taking the supplements that are being recommended.
Okay, so on the whole diet and eating, my thought, and you can correct me if you need to here, is that actually most of us, we know what we should be eating. The whole 5 a day, fruit and veg, varied diet, not too much alcohol, not too much sweet stuff. You have to be living with your head in the sand or, just with your eyes completely shut, not to know what we should be eating. So my thought is that can't possibly be the problem. That must be something else. And kind of over to you if you agree. And what is the other problem?
I do agree. And I think that's why the survey was showing that more people than the evidence proves thought they were having their 5 a day and generally eating okay. It's because we kind of are. I feel it's several things. It's one is that the information that we're getting mainly on social media, unfortunately, is very conflicting. So 1 minute it'll be the carnivore saying eat lots of meat, and then the other time it's the plant-based diet people, go vegan and vegetarian. And so there's an awful lot of extremes out there that people are then saying, well, I'm kind of in the middle, so I must be doing okay. I'm not that extreme or the other extreme. And so they're really they're not sure what a balanced diet looks like. We found that with 30% of people saying they just really didn't know because of all this extreme information. And then I think secondly, it's about putting it into practice. So if you say, I need to eat 5 a day fruit and veg today when you get up, and then you have a quick breakfast and rush out the door to work. Before you know it, the day has kind of taken control and you're rushing from one thing to the next. A lot of workers don't get a proper lunch break anymore. The office workers will just be sitting there at their desk with a sandwich rather than having a healthy salad or a bowl of soup or things like that. So I think it is just about the practicalities of getting those things into your diet on a regular basis. I think another issue is cooking skills. So a lot of the basics are missing with people's cooking skills. And so it's much easier just to get a ready meal, stick it in the microwave, call up one of the, delivery type companies to bring you a pizza or something. And they're not healthy foods, these. We really need to be cooking a lot more from home and having simple things cooked at home. And I don't think a lot of people have necessarily got those skills.
Couple of things there. Okay, maybe some people don't have the skills, but I'm sure it can't take that much to sort of reactivate the skills or get doing some cooking yourself. I think a lot of people kind of fall back on that as a bit of an excuse, maybe. Or am I being a bit too harsh there?
I'm sure some of it is laziness, Mike, and the other is you just feel a bit overfaced by it. You might say, oh, well, how do I make a stew? And then it might, you look up the internet and it tells you that you need an ingredient. You don't have it in your cupboard and you think, oh, goodness me, can't be bothered going out looking for that just one
That's
ingredient.
the fun bit. You then, I tell my kids, I tell them what they're having for dinner, and then I have a slight pause and I say, with variations. And they look terrified.
Yeah.
But actually, it normally tastes all right.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, in a way, it would be really good to have like a really simple app about store cupboard stuff, just things that you have in I've always got like beans and pulses in the cupboard and stock cubes and frozen peas and, all these things are really, really useful for just putting a meal together. And that's the sort of thing that you get from your parents. And I absolutely swear by Delia Smith. I've still got the same Delia Smith recipe book that I've had for about 40 years. Just going for the kind of simple stuff is a good way forward.
Yeah, I've got another thing which I think is a problem, and let me run this by you and see what you think. I think a big problem is this kind of sciencifying of our diet with specialized foods and sports nutrition and vitamins and supplements, and kind of all this stuff is normalized as though we really need it. And and the fact is, this is just people trying to sell us stuff by dressing it up in different ways. And I sometimes, as an example, I go on the tube, and they had those ads on the tube. I don't know what percentage. It seems high. You sit, each little seating area has 5 ads, and quite often 2 or even 3 of them are for some sort of supplement, vitamins, or sports nutrition or something like that. So I find this sciencifying of the whole, what should be a delight of making food and eating it, to be, well, frankly, rather alarming.
I don't think it needs to be an either or though, Mike, because in an ideal world, and I know this having trained as a dietitian, you can get everything you need from a balanced diet except vitamin D if you're living in the Northern Hemisphere. And that's because 90% of the vitamin D comes from sunlight. Frankly, we don't get enough of it in the Northern Hemisphere. So that's why the government recommends that we take a vitamin D supplement for about, 6-7 months of the year. But going back to supplements, I see them as almost a belt and braces approach. So we know from looking at the National Diet and Nutrition Survey that a large number of people are lacking nutrients like magnesium, potassium, which is important for blood pressure, iron. Half of women are not getting enough iron in the diet, iodine, folate for pregnancy and things like that. So these nutrients are missing in the diet for a lot of people, and it has not changed for 30 years. I've been looking at the National Diet and Nutrition Survey for a long time. It is not changing. So what do? Do you just keep banging on about a healthy, balanced diet and it falls on deaf ears amongst some people? Or do you say, look, go for the healthy, balanced diet, but in the meantime, and while you're trying to get that right, just take a daily multivit. It's not going to do you any harm. You can get very, very inexpensive supermarket or chemist options, or from health food stores. You don't have to buy expensive stuff, but it's just like that belt and braces, because people are in reality are missing out on those nutrients, and it will have an impact on their health and well-being over time. So I don't see it as an either or. I want people to eat a healthy, balanced diet, but in the meantime, I'm comfortable with them taking a reputable supplement while they're trying to get that right.
Well, yeah, okay, I'll take your point. However, I think it leads into this a pill for everything, which is how we started off. Are people looking after themselves proactively? Well, I'll just wait until something's wrong, and then I'll take a pill. I don't know. It still worries me a little bit.
Yeah, I can see why it worries you, but then I think that's when you're taking the binary approach, that I would never support people saying, forget the healthy, balanced diet, I'm just going to have a pill. Or in the 70s when I was growing up, my nana had one of those funny wobble machines that, she put this strap round her back and it wobbled her flesh up and down. And this was supposed to do instead of exercise. I mean, we all laugh at that now and say, for goodness sake, just go out for a walk or go dancing or go for a swim. Sure. Don't sort of, attach these things to you that wobble your flesh up and down, because it doesn't help with physical activity or weight loss or anything like that. But, I do think that supplements are part of the solution. They're not the problem.
Okay. However, the problem is certainly there. We all need to do a bit more exercise. We all need to eat properly, and we all need to sleep enough. So, Carrie, when you're in charge, how are you going to make us all do that? What are you going to do? Are you going to be what sort of leader are you going to be, and how are you going to try and persuade us all to do this?
Oh, right. So if I was world queen for a day.
Exactly. That's the phrase I was looking for, yeah. Or dictator, I was going to say. That might be a bit unfair.
Yeah, dictator, even better. So I always start with sleep, because I think how you feel in the morning and whether you feel up to, cooking or going for a walk or doing anything depends on how well you slept. So I would say to people, don't have any screens an hour before you go to bed. Read a book, do something relaxing, have a nice bath, listen to an audiobook, and you will nod off happily. You've then got this kind of clean sleep environment. So you get a good night's sleep, you wake up in the morning. And I always feel it's better, because I'm very busy with family and work and things, to schedule in your exercise. Actually put it in your diary like an appointment. And whatever exercise you fancy, it doesn't necessarily need to be going to the gym. So I do high rocks and CrossFit. Other people might want to dance, swim, go for a walk the dogs, go for a jog, cycle, whatever. It doesn't matter what it is that you do, as long as your heart rate's up a bit, you're slightly out of breath, and you're doing it for at least 30 minutes. So get that scheduled into the diary and do it every day, just so it becomes a habit. With diet, that's a bit more complicated, because people have got lots of different preferences. So what I would say is try to cook more at home, whether it's making a packed lunch instead of buying a ready-made sandwich, kind of get ahead of your diet and prepare in advance. When you go shopping, think about your meals. What meals am I trying to cater for, so that you do get all the ingredients, and just try and cook a little bit more at home. It can be 3-ingredient meals. It can literally be some sort of carb, like, pasta, a bit of meat or fish or eggs or a vegetarian alternative, and some sort of veg or salad. It just needs to be pretty simple. So just try and start small with this. I also just want to mention as well that Holland and Barrett are offering 300,000 free wellness check-ins. So if you've got any questions about your diet or sleep or anything like that, pop in and have a chat. It doesn't cost anything. It's really aimed at the under 40s who are not getting a lot of attention from GPs at the moment.
Okay. So who will you end up chatting to?
So you end up chatting, they've got these wellness people that work in their shops who go through training. So they're not just like, anybody on the shop floor. They are actually people who have had internal training from Holland and Barrett.
Okay. They're not going to suggest, well, just take a load of our supplements and pills and everything will be all right, are they?
No, they wouldn't. And actually, having knowing the company well, they are actually asked to go and refer people to their GPs or another healthcare professional if they think that it can't be fixed just with a chat. And also, interestingly enough, Holland and Barrett sell foods as well as supplements, so it isn't just a supplements first approach.
Very good. All right. Now, if people are listening to this, and think, okay, I need to do something about those three things, the sleep, the exercise and the food. And I would like some pointers. Can you suggest a good source of information? You kind of hinted at one already, but
Yeah. I mean, I'll give you a couple. So the Holland and Barrett Back Your Body campaign, you can have a look at that website, but also a really good website as well as the British Nutrition Foundation, which has got a lot of information on their website, and they're very evidence-based and scientific as well.
Excellent. All right, look. So, Carrie, thank you very much indeed for chatting. This is important stuff. There can't be anything much more important than this for our public health. So many thanks.
Absolutely. It's lovely to talk to you.
My next guests are Alex Clarke, a nutritionist, and Raymond Brown, a person who's lost an awful lot of weight. The topic really is convenience food versus home cooking. My first question was to Alex, really. Nutritionist, being a nutritionist is not a protected title, so actually anyone can call themselves a nutritionist. So I asked Alex what her qualifications are and what if she's on a professional register somewhere, and also again the difference between a nutritionist and a dietitian.
Absolutely, yeah, no, great questions. So I'm a nutritionist, a registered nutritionist with the Association for Nutrition, which is they hold the UK Register of Nutritionists. Because yeah, you're right. Unfortunately, nutritionist isn't a protected title at the moment, but being on the register shows that you do have the appropriate qualifications to work as a nutritionist, that you have the knowledge, you have the experience. I myself completed my master's in nutritional sciences at the University of Nottingham, following a psychology degree. So yeah, I've been with the Association for Nutrition, and then have worked as a nutritionist for 11, 12 years now. Okay. And yeah, what's the difference between a nutritionist and a dietitian? That's a really great question. And actually, as part of our team here at Slimming World Head Office, we have a team of both nutritionists and dietitians because we recognise the expertise and the different experiences we all bring to the table. So as a nutritionist, my focus is on healthy eating, is on supporting people to stay healthy. I'm a public health nutritionist, so supporting the public health messaging, bringing nutrition to maintain health, whereas dietitians tend to work more from a clinical point of view. So if you were unwell with something, for instance, you had type 2 diabetes, you had kidney disease, you would maybe see a dietitian to get nutrition advice to support your condition whilst you're unwell, whereas I'm more preventative and hopefully preventing. They can give guidance as well alongside dietitians, so you get that overall support.
Okay, good. Right, good answer. Thank you very much for that. So you're registered with the Association for Nutrition. That's what you said. Okay,
right.
So yeah. we can go to that website, type in your name, and it'll pop up saying yes, she's real. And I think that's a good thing for everyone to do when they're talking to a nutritionist. Just it's worth checking these things out. Lovely, thank you. Convenience food of all sorts. We all like it, don't we? possibly a little bit too much.
Definitely, yeah, and they're convenient for a reason. We need convenience. Life is busy, isn't it? So, yeah, I think there's definitely a reason why people are turning to these foods, but they're not necessarily the best for our health.
So yeah, Raymond, was that your downfall?
Yeah, it was convenience foods, takeaways, and things like that was downfall from long times ago. And yeah, I would always turn to those if I just couldn't be bothered to do any cooking or anything. I would just turn to those to fill the hole, as you could say, and then get something out of it that way. But then obviously came with Slimming World, and it came more about cooking for myself and cooking for others, and
Mm.
using fresh, healthy ingredients to make sure that I was getting the good things in my body, not just fueling it with rubbish, essentially.
Well, when you were eating lots of convenience foods and takeaways, one thing I want to just look at a little bit is just how much they cost.
Yeah, it's very expensive to do that, to live off those. Essentially, it's very expensive every time. At the time it was 30, 40 pounds, but now obviously with the cost of living going up, everything's a lot more than that to just get a simple meal. Whereas you could do the same sort of thing at home and have many portions of that meal for the next few days if you cook it for yourself. So it's a
Right.
lot cheaper to do it yourself, essentially.
So I mean, just how I'm thinking. So we're a family of four. Say if we order pizza, which we do occasionally, not that often, I have to say, but we do. We can easily spend 40 or 50 pounds
Yeah.
on a takeaway meal for the family. And is that pretty normal for a family? I imagine it might be.
Yeah, it's 40, 50, could even go up to £60, especially if you get a Chinese. That tends to always go quite high when you're feeding that amount of people.
Right. But is all takeout food? I mean, pizza, that's not that bad, is it really? Alex, a few pizzas now and again. It's not going to kill us, is it? Or is it?
I mean, it's always frequency with these sorts of things. There's absolutely room, to have the occasional takeaway, and food is so much more than nutrition as well. It is about, bringing people together or, eating food you enjoy. But a lot of takeaways, unfortunately, can be high in fat, can be high in sugar and salt. So having them occasionally is fine, and you can absolutely do that as a Slimming World member as well. But yeah, it's always about that balance of having more of the healthier foods that are lower in fat, lower in sugar, and yeah, choosing the takeaways a bit less often. And we've seen from this research as well, they're so expensive that actually cutting down on them is also beneficial for your budget as well.
One thing that I have noticed, so as well as buying pizzas occasionally as a takeaway, I might buy frozen pizzas. Now, from a supermarket, frozen pizza, take it home, stick it in the oven. Sometimes these things seem extraordinarily cheap to me. So look at the other end of the scale, £3 or £4 for quite a large pizza. Now, I couldn't make it from scratch for that much money. So is it really sort of takeaways that are the problem? I mean, there are all sorts of convenience food, and this idea that it's all too expensive, I don't know. I think some of them are scarily cheap.
I think it's a real combination. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And sometimes it can seem like the more cost-effective choice, especially if you're feeding a family and wanting to do so quickly. And not all convenience foods, I should say, is the same. Convenience in and of itself isn't a bad thing. It's about the quality of the food you're choosing, though, and how healthy those choices are. Pizza, actually, a bag of flour and some tomato sauce, like a tin of tomatoes and a bit of cheese, could cost about that amount as well. Obviously, it does take a bit more time, but you would get so much more nutrition from doing that than from a frozen pizza. So I think it's more how
Why? It's the same stuff.
it is, but you're making it from fresh, so you know exactly what's gone into it, and it's literally flour and water, maybe a little bit of salt. Whereas if something has been manufactured to put on a shelf and have a long shelf life, it might have higher levels of salt than you would normally add, and potential other ingredients as well. Whereas you can have fresh tomatoes on there, and fresh cheese as well. So that's the thing. Convenience foods, it all differs, and I think the market has definitely changed as well. Actually, I think ready meals back in the day were very much unhealthy, but people want healthier food, so there are healthier options available now in the supermarkets. but it's being aware of that. And sometimes if they are very cheap, they are often made from cheaper quality ingredients, unfortunately, maybe fattier ingredients, because that is cheaper. So say your pizza had meat on, if it's very cheap, it's probably got very fatty meat on it, which isn't good for us health-wise.
So we're saying a lot of us eat this kind of food, fall back on it. Are there any statistics on just how many people do eat like this, and do those statistics change for different age groups, different areas of the country, that sort of thing?
Yeah, well, we looked at this in the UK. So we found, in the UK that 60% of people are typically spending up to £50 on takeaways and high fat, high sugar convenience foods. I don't have
£50, what, a year? That sounds all right to me.
Oh, a week, sorry, a week.
A week. You didn't say anything. I was just being a bit naughty. Okay, a week.
But yeah, a week. So that really adds up. So actually, if you look at it over a year, that £50 a week times 52, that's a huge amount of money.
So when you say people, is this a family or an individual?
I suppose it's 60% of people who tend to say they spend it. So whether it's the individual buying for the family as well, so they're buying it for their whole family, or maybe, it is the individual members as well.
Because if one person is spending £50 a week on takeaway food, that's like having a takeaway dinner 4 or 5 times a week.
Yeah, which we know some people are. We know some people are. I guess that was takeaways and high fat, high sugar convenience foods as well. So things like your frozen pizzas and things, and foods that you grab on the go. Maybe your coffee shop in the morning when you're on the way to work. You might buy something with that. So yeah, that was what our research showed.
And how many people are doing this? Do we know? You mentioned a statistic. I missed it.
So 60% of people who reported in our
60% of people.
Yeah. So huge numbers, and actually a third.
Hang on a moment. Just 60% of people in the UK are spending £50 a week on takeaways.
That's right. Yes, that's what our research found. Goodness
me. All right. Well, if your research said that, I must admit, my take on that is I don't believe it. But there you go. All right. That's a massive number. Okay, now let's go on to kind of why, because we all know we shouldn't be doing this. I'm sure there's not a single person left in the UK that doesn't know that living on £50 worth of takeaways a week is a very bad idea. So why are 60% of us doing that? Or you say 60%. I'm saying I don't. I imagine it's a massive number of people. But anyway, let's park that. It doesn't really matter.
It is, yes. Yeah.
So Raymond, I'll ask Raymond this question because you've been through it. Why are we all doing this to ourselves? We know it's bad.
We know it's bad, but obviously it definitely does taste nice. But then it's easy. It's easier just to pick up something off the shelf or to call up someone so they bring it to your front door and you just sit down and eat it. It makes life easier for everyone. But I find the joy in making things myself now. I like to be in the kitchen and making things for my family and seeing whether they like it or not, and then it goes on to our list of things we're going to make again. Or
I agree. Making stuff is nice, but let's just how we got ourselves into this problem. Are we all just lazy, or is it a bit more complicated than that somehow?
It could be people are lazy, or it could just be people just need that convenience. Maybe they've got busier things going on in their lives, and they return to those things because they're ready. Sometimes they're cheap, sometimes they're more expensive, and it's just easy to pop in the oven or pop in the microwave to get done quickly, so they can continue on with the things that they need to do.
Okay, so you really think it's as basic as that? We're lazy and we haven't got enough time.
Sometimes it is, yeah. Time is busy. I tend to take my time on a Sunday to do my cooking to make sure I get everything done in the week, so then I can come back during the week to food that I've already made and heat it up myself. Okay. So I know that food is going to be good food for me to eat.
This is a sad reflection on 60% of us in the UK, isn't it? If we're 60% of us are too lazy or too busy to cook a decent meal.
I think
Alex, you want to chip in here? What are we going to do about it?
Yeah, so people sometimes, we also found from the survey that, 1 in 5 people in the UK say they don't feel confident cooking from scratch. And I think a lot of that is, it's their sort of perceived ability as well as to whether they can do this. And, it's great to hear that Ray has changed things around and he enjoys cooking, but I think a lot of people just don't know where to start. And when you've got so many demands on your time, where to start. And I think that's what group offers so nicely. A Slimming World group, it helps you, it gives you that starting place, it gives you lots of
Yeah.
recipes, it gives you lots of knowledge, and the support to do it as well. I think when we're sort of got so many other time pressures, we lead such busy lives, we've got jobs and families, so to actually have some support, and like you say, we all know, we roughly know what's healthy or what's less healthier, why aren't we doing it, and it's having that support to be able to make that behavior change, because the environment we're in, where we're constantly bombarded by cheap pizza and takeaways at the click of a button on our phone, it can be really hard to push back against that. But group really sort of gives you those tools to do so.
I think it must be behavior change, because most people in their heart of hearts can cook something. I mean, we might not all be wonderful cooks that can, make cordon bleu this and that and the next thing, but I think most of us can cook a basic kind of meal.
Absolutely, yeah. I think once people, I think sometimes it can feel overwhelming in your head, but yeah, a really simple meal of sort of a pasta sauce can be really easy. It's literally, a tin of tomatoes, an onion, some garlic, some dried pasta. You've got a meal on the table that's balanced and healthy. But sometimes that can feel overwhelming, and people just don't know where to start or what ingredients to choose. But so many of our recipes actually that Slimming World have are, simple, 5 ingredient recipes to get people started as well. Because it can feel overwhelming, especially, you're watching your cooking show and it's all fancy food. Take it back to basics with simple foods you enjoy.
Now, and as far as if we do that, we save a lot of money. We've spoken a little bit about that. And let's bring Raymond in again, because you've mentioned a couple of times kind of what you get out of cooking properly and eating properly, other than just saving a lot of money.
I get the enjoyment of doing it. I try to do my own fakeaways is what I try to do. I try to replicate the things I would normally get from the takeaways. I try to do that myself, and I feel like I'll become a better kick doing that. I'll make my own Chinese banquet rather than going and ordering a Chinese banquet. They could cost upwards of 40, 50, 60 pounds. I'll make my own and we'll do it at home, and it all often tastes better, be healthier for the inside. So I'll put lots of veg and things inside of it. So I enjoy doing it, and I like seeing my family's faces when they have those foods, and sometimes they prefer my food to what they would pay the money for.
Okay, can't get any better than that. How long have you been doing this for, Raymond? Because you mentioned that you've lost some weight. How much weight have you lost, and over what period of time?
I've lost over 12 stone, and it's been taken about 3 to 4 years for me to do it. I started and stopped a few times at the beginning, and then I just continued on and kept going and going. And I've now just the other day lost 50% of my starting weight. So I lost half of myself essentially.
Goodness me, that's extraordinary. I mean, that's got to be a success story, Raymond.
Yeah, I feel very proud of what I've done. It's been hard. It's not easy. It's a roller coaster, as you say. You go up and down, up and down. But I've just the group mentality has helped me to keep going back and continuing on. The support of everyone around me to try and continue on has helped it. And yeah, I've succeeded to get to my target weight, and now my job is to stay at that where I want to be now.
Okay, and have your family helped you in this journey?
Yeah. Myself, and my wife do it together, so we both support ourselves that way. And then I've got my family all around me, and my friends and everyone is always trying, just supporting me and pushing me on. And then we've obviously got my swimming well family that also keeps me going to group every week, and we share our ideas and we talk about different ways to do our foods and support each other when we're up or when we're down.
Okay, so when you go to a meeting, you go to a weekly meeting, a Slimming World weekly meeting. What kind of happens? Do you sit around in a circle and say, "Oh goodness, this week I slipped. I ate a whole trifle or something"? I don't know, how does it work?
No, we'll go into the meeting, obviously do our weigh and we'll say hi to everyone. And generally, we just sit and talk about food. Our consultant will shout out the ones that have had what they sort of wanted to see on the scales, and give the opportunity for people to talk about if what they didn't see was what they quite wanted, that they can voice what they want to say, and we help each other. And there's no pressure to voice what you're feeling and how you're feeling, but everyone can if they want to. But there's generally just a good chat about food and different ideas of what to do with food, and things that might have worked for you that week that other people could listen to and help them to try and give a go next week. So we just
Okay.
generally support and work with each other to move on to our goals, because everyone's trying to get to the same place.
Let me finish. Well, a couple of questions yet. Something that intrigues me. You said that you were trying to sometimes you try and recreate the takeaway food. You try and recreate a Chinese takeaway.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you're making it, so you know what goes into it. But my thought is, if you're clever enough to make it the same and taste the same, or even slightly better, it's going to have very similar stuff in it. So is it not going to be as equally as good or as bad for you? That's obviously not the case. Alex, can you say why? Why is what Raymond makes, if he recreates one of his takeaways so it tastes the same or better, why is that not just as problematical as the one he buys?
Yeah, because I'm sure that Ray will be recreating it with ingredients such as, so he'll be using less fat, but he'll be still adding all those spices or herbs, and they bring all the flavor to it as well. Sometimes it's how you cook it can sort of give it lots of flavor as well. We know members love air fryers, for instance, and that still gives all that lovely flavor and just cooks the food really well, but without the need for lots of fat. You're also using lots of fresh ingredients, so fresh fruit and veg. Sometimes takeaways can feel quite greasy or too salty, and then you get that sluggish feeling afterwards. Whereas actually, if you're cooking something from scratch, you can use much fresher ingredients that make you feel much better in yourself. And like I said, all that flavor can just come from different spice mixes, different recipes, and things like that, which can taste even better. And we know a lot of members say that actually once they start cooking their own food, they tend to prefer the taste of that. When they go back to the takeaway, they're a bit like, oh, it doesn't taste quite as good as I remember, actually. So they do prefer cooking like home cooked food more.
My wife always says at home there's an extra added not necessarily secret ingredient, but the ingredient of love. That makes all the difference.
Oh, absolutely. That's lovely. Yeah,
Yeah.
that isn't that satisfaction like Ray's talked about of preparing that food and feeling proud of putting it on the table. So definitely.
Yeah, no, I'm the chief cook at our house quite often, and I enjoy it. I like it. I like making something that people like to eat. So yeah, I totally get where Raymond's coming from there. Right. So the final question, if people are listening to this and thinking, yeah, actually, you know what, I need to cut down on this kind of food, this convenience food, to save a lot of money and also to make my life a little healthier. A good source of, can you please recommend a good source of information, various ideas, various tips? Go ahead, Alex. Where can people get some good info?
Yeah, so please do visit Slimming World's website, so slimmingworld.co.uk. We've got loads of information, if you are looking for group or online support yourself, where you'll find loads of features and a healthy eating plan, support with getting more active. There's also loads of recipes on the website, so you can, have a taste of what you'll get more of through your membership as well, and get started with some ideas, and just loads of information on all the support we offer.
Good. All right, guys. Look, thank you so much for taking the time to come and chat.
Oh, thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much to my guests on this week's show, and they were Dr. Carrie Ruxton talking about being productive in health, and then we had Alex Clarke, nutritionist, and Raymond Brown talking about really convenience food versus home cooking. So thank you very much to them. Thank you to you for listening, and have a healthy week until next week.
Thanks for listening to the Relax Back UK show. Join me, Mike Dilk, again next week for more fascinating interviews and chat. If you're listening to the podcast version, please subscribe, like, and share it with your family and friends. And have a healthy week. Until next week.